All right, welcome everybody. It's so good to see a bunch of people here. We are doing a social media training today. Just wanted to start with a few introductions. My name is David Hudabarat. I am the communications director at NFSN. And what we're doing here today is part of our Values Aligned Universal Meals campaign. So one clear takeaway from the pandemic for school nutrition professionals is that universal meals are a necessity. And National Farm to School Network is advocating for values-aligned universal meals focused on equity for the most impacted stakeholders in the food system. Through feedback and direction from partners, we created the Who's at the Table campaign to provide tools to communicate how our shared values can create healthy school meals for all kids that transform our food system and advocate for policies to do that. Ji-yoon just chatted in the website for that. Please check it out. It has a bunch of different resources, action packs where people can learn more and find out ways to take action around this. I want to just briefly introduce the Values Aligned Universal Meals team. So if you can get off camera briefly so that we can wave. Ji-yoon, please give a wave. Excellent. Ji-yoon is our communications associate. And Karen Spangler, give us a wave. Karen is our policy director. And Ryan Betts, if you are there, you all can see him. Please give us a wave. Oh, I see you're driving. All right, get off camera again. Awesome, good to see you. He is our policy specialist. And together we have been putting this campaign along with partners to really get the word out on values aligned universal meals. There's a lot of things happening in individual states, and we're wanting to promote that with other states as well as nationally. So one of the activities for the campaign is doing a number of different trainings, such as this one on social media with Catnip, and then also a second one on November 15 that will focus on traditional media, such as newspapers, and how to build relationships with journalists. And that one's going to be with Matt Davis. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it on to Faye and Claire. Glad to have you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having us. Let me just get the presentation. Let me share my screen super quick. Awesome. I hope everybody can see my screen. If you've got any questions at any point, please feel free to chuck them into the chat. The wonderful folks at NFSN are keeping an eye on that. Really casual. If there's anything that springs to mind, please put your hand up and we'll answer them as we go, and we'll have a Q&A session at the end. So my name's Faye. I'm the founder of Catnip, and I'm joined today by my senior content manager, Claire Riley, and we'll be running through some need to know stuff about social media in 2022 and heading into 2023 as well. So just in terms of a very quick agenda, we're going to be talking about what's hot right now on social media. So what are the big trends that we all need to know? We're then going to move into how we reach our target audiences and how do we retain them. Our third topic is going to be all about working with influencers to amplify your message. We're then going to have a short break because these can be long trainings, and we know we've all spent so much time over the past few years on Zoom, so we're always building a little bit of a comfort break. We're then going to have a little bit of a workshop. So we'd actually love if there's any folks on this call today, if you've got any current social media challenges, so whether that's low budget or staff capacity, we'd love for you to be thinking about any recent social media challenges that you've actually had and that you'd feel comfortable with sharing with this group, and we can actually workshop those. Together. Topic number 4, we're then going to be talking about social media trends to look out for in 2023, which scarily is not that far away. Cannot believe it's the 1st of November today. And then we'll finish with a bit of a Q&A. So in terms of our first topic, we want to talk about what's hot right now on social media. So 2020 was definitely the year we'll never forget. As our behavior shifted amid the pandemic, the major social media platforms had to rapidly evolve to shift with us as well, to meet those rising demands of us all being online and user needs. This hasn't stopped. We're still spending more time online than we ever have done before. And these adaptations gave rise to new social media trends, which we've continued to see over the past couple of years, and they're continuing to grow. So the social media landscape has not been the same since the COVID pandemic in 2020. I'm just seeing a thing in the chat. Yes, I can speak a little slower, no problem. Thank you for that. Sorry, I will definitely try and do that. I can be a bit of a waffler, so I do apologize. In terms of some of those top trends that we're seeing right now, so user-generated content, this has actually been around for a while, but definitely over the past few years, we've seen an explosion in this space. More people have spent time online. The trend towards homemade content has really been on the rise. We've all spent time on TikTok. We might have tried to spend time on TikTok making our cat famous. That might just have been me. So we've really seen kind of a big rise of user-generated content. And it's a really key one to keep in mind when you're thinking about your own social media or your own organization's social media. UGC really does act as social proof to be able to promote your organization's message, strengthen relationships with your donors, and also instill trust in your target audience as well. Another big trend that we're currently seeing at the moment and will continue into 2023 is snackable content. So when we say snackable content, it's stuff that's short, sharp, easy to digest. And it's a really big thing that we've seen in the rise of TikTok and Instagram Reels. And it's really all about keeping it short and sweet so that you can grab your audience's attention. And we'll be talking a little bit more about that later. Communities, online communities, so Facebook groups, Twitter circles, WhatsApp channels, Instagram DM chains, the list goes on. And throughout the pandemic, digital connectivity really played such a huge role in how we built connections that we'd normally make offline, and we were bringing them online. So really this line of, if content is king, community is queen. You've always got to think about, where are your audience gathering online? Where are they having these conversations that you want to be part of? A conversational tone as well. So bringing a human touch to social media. They call it social media for a reason. It's all about being social, and it's about being conversational. The way that we speak to our friends on Facebook is completely different from how we might write a professional email, for example. So that the conversational tone that we use ourselves on social needs to be applied to organizational social media as well. The tone and communication of your language is so important when you're wanting to provide that impression that your organization is run by humans and not by bots, for example. So it's really important to actually have a conversational tone to your language when we're thinking about social media content. Going live on social was another big trend that we saw in 2020, and continues to be a top trend as well. A recent study that we found showed that 80% of internet users actually prefer live video to blogs. So if you go back even just a few years, blogs were kind of such a highly consumed form of online content, but now people are really wanting and expecting live content for events and all of this kind of thing. And this really matches this last point as well, bringing the offline online. As we kind of said, any sort of big event that was being held in 2020 had to be shifted online due to COVID. And it's almost a few years later, it is now an expectation indication that there is an online element to these sort of big events. 56% of live stream watchers in a recent study actually agreed that watching online was nearly as good as attending in person. So people have become so used to sort of watching and consuming events online that it's really important that you're considering that in your social communications as well. Claire, over to you for snackable content.
Thanks, Faye, and hi everyone. So yeah, as Faye said, we labelled it, and many other people do, snackable content, little short bits of content that are there to inform, entertain, and inspire. So we are obviously constantly on social media, and we've pulled together some examples, and one of them is from our very own National Farm to School network of a really great way of informing audiences. So we worked with NFSN on a series of Instagram Reels. It gave important information about the players that are involved in the farm to school system, from parents to principals to produce suppliers. And, you know, farm to school might not be something that people know a lot about, and they might not know the steps taken within the process, and they probably don't know the people that are named as the players. So informing that audience just makes them feel a lot more connected to the cause and a lot more informed to be able to engage with it, talk about it, and maybe even talk to their peers. Another part of the snackable content is entertain. So I haven't got a link to show you, but come with me on this journey. So there's a really wonderful TikTok from the ASPCA. ASPCA, that's right. It's the person with a cat in the back of a police car, and it's a really big trending sound and filter on TikTok. And they've used it to promote fostering. So it's a lady holding a Kit Kat in the back of a car, and it's just a really funny way that reaches new audience, and something that you probably wouldn't expect like a fostering organization to use, but it really did really well, and it's brought them more attention and therefore more reach. Another inspiring TikTok is from the ACLU, and this was a lot more of a more serious content. But so a staff at the Supreme Court went live from the Supreme Court after Roe versus Wade was overturned. And the reason why it was so impactful is because it was like really in the moment content. There was a rallying call to mobilize. It was really, really present on that day. It was all over the news. So having someone there to be able to connect the audience immediately with what was going on just really, really worked really well. And I think that had like 40K likes. So there's way more impressions and users as well. So how can snackable content help you? Well, it's all down to experimentation, really. So testing and learning. So we'd recommend using different content with different members of staff and partners' points of views, just kind of testing what works and resonates with audiences, using and testing trending sounds and filters, and just really seeing what content really works with your algorithm and play into what works. So if you try a few different things and you see, oh, that did really well, there's no harm in replicating that for different content objectives or content types. So Faye, back over to you.
Awesome, thanks Claire. So we just did want to do a very quick poll with the folks that are in this meeting. Are any of you using any of these trends that we've just kind of spoken about? And just as a reminder, they were UGC, snackable content, communities, conversational tone, going live or online events. So would love to just hear from folks if you are using any of these trends. Oh, perfect. Excellent. Seeing all the votes come in. Wonderful. Great. So number one, I think, or our top trend that is being used at the moment is a conversational tone. That's amazing to see. So conversational tone, number one. Snackable content as well is kind of high up there as number two, which is great. And then user generated content coming in 3. So really great to see. Really great to see that you folks are already using some of these trends. Wonderful. Moving us on to the second topic that we want to talk to you folks about today, and that's all about how do you reach your target audiences And most importantly, how do you retain them? Like once you've reached them, how do you keep them coming back time and time again? Identifying your key audiences is the first step to building any successful social media program. It's really about thinking, where are my audience going to be? How can I use those platforms to best reach them? And what sort of content do they want to be consuming? So for example, the content you might serve up to policymakers is going to be completely different to the content that you deliver to supporters or donors or the media. So this section is all about how we attract and how we retain those target audiences. So number one, the first thing that to really mention in this section is your content strategy. You know, what content does your audience want to be engaging with? This is where social media reporting can be such a powerful tool. And I cannot underestimate the power that having a social media reporting system set up, and it doesn't have to be fancy. It could really be you're using the native metrics where you're logging into Facebook and you're pulling those, or if you work at a bigger organization and you've got access to a social media reporting system such as Sprout Social or Hootsuite, for example, definitely look into how your content performs for your audiences. This is where we really begin to learn like what content works well for us and what content works well for our audiences. And really just keep track of it as well. Like if you decide to do reporting like once a month or like once a week, so however you're set up at your organization, it will just really begin to inform future campaigns, and you can adjust and learn as needed. Working with the platform. So each social platform is completely different from one another. You know, if we think about the big three, which historically speaking tends to be Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, the people that follow you on each of those are going to be different from each other, which is really important, which is why we should be tailoring our content across each individual platform. Each social platform as well knows how best to keep their audiences. This is why we always hear it in the news about Facebook making algorithm updates or Instagram introducing Reels, for example. They know what sort of content their audience wants to consume, and you can actually use that to your advantage. So for example, when Instagram brought out Instagram Reels earlier this year as a rival to TikTok, the actual algorithm started pushing Reels to the top of people's news feeds. So the organizations and the brands and the big accounts that did start making Reels when it first came out were getting more exposure, because obviously people, you know, the platforms want their users to stay on that platform. So it's a really important just to keep an eye, like what is happening in the world of social media? What's the latest platform update, and what can we learn from that? Building up your social communities as well. You know, we said a little earlier, if content is king, community is queen. Social media communities and groups are so effective because in essence, it's what social media was designed for. It's all about connection. So if you can provide a space for your audiences to connect, you're providing them what they're coming to social media to do, which is to connect with each other. You know, if you think about it, there's a group out there for everything from like hamsters to Harry Styles. There's like an online community for everybody out there. So it's really about thinking, okay, what does my cause or what does my organization, what area do we work in where we could really tap into this online community? And this is why things such as like Facebook groups are amazing, because you can bring people together. Engaging influential voices as well. So when we say influencers, and a big stipulation I should make here is we don't just mean celebrities. This could be activists that are super active in your cause area. It could be campaigners. It could be a policymaker. It could be a farmer that's got a ton of followers on Instagram. It doesn't have to be a super famous celebrity. So when we talk about influencers, that's what we mean. We've got a whole section on this, but really engaging with those people that your audience are following is going to amplify your reach, and you're going to reach new users and new audiences by working with them closely. Ads as well are a great way to reach your audience. You know, a person's social media account can tell us so much about them. It's a little creepy if we kind of dig into it and think about like, how much does Facebook really know about us? But from an advertising point of view, you can tailor your ads so specifically so that when you want to reach a specific audience, you can do that. And this is a really good thing as well to keep an eye on, like, what are your competitors? Like, what are other peers in that space? Where are they advertising? There's a really nifty trick on Facebook where you can go and visit a Facebook page and you can actually go and look at the ads that that Facebook page is running. This information is all public. You just have to log in with a normal profile. So if there is an organization that is like-minded or that you want to kind of emulate or learn from, go and actually have a look at the ads that they're running and see what you can learn from that. You know, unfortunately, organic reach for social media has been on the decline over the past number of years because the platforms themselves are wanting people to actually invest more money and invest more into those platforms, which is why having an ad budget, whether that's tiny or large, depending on the size of your organization, can just actually be really helpful to reach those new audiences. Finally, we've got Activate as well. So this is all about planning key campaigns to ensure you're reaching your audiences when you need them the most. You know, a well-formulated and executed content and campaign strategy not only drives engagement, but it can reach new audiences as well. It can raise the number of donations that you're getting in. You know, your content and your campaign strategy should be syncing with each other, and they should really be the roadmap of activities that are going to allow you to reach those audiences. Just in terms of talking about the benefits of communities, so I know we've kind of touched on this a couple of times so far now, but especially in the pandemic, the digital connectivity went through the roof. You know, people were heading online to actually build those connections that we were missing offline. And this is why we saw such a boom in online groups and in online fundraising. You might have seen it as well, where Facebook have now started doing like mass participation fundraising for events, because again, it's all about creating that community. Are Facebook groups a lot of work? They can be, but not necessarily. It's all about planning, and it's really thinking, okay, what group do I want to create for my audience, and how do I best do that? A couple of examples that we've put in here. So the first one is from the American Cancer Society. This is their Relay for Life group. I worked on this a few years ago when I was based in the US, but this group was all about providing a space for people that had either suffered with cancer themselves or had been impacted in a personal way to come together and do the Relay for Life and support each other. You know, everything from sharing recipes to Spotify running or training playlists. And it was such a wonderful community to be part of. And the community just grew, you know, it continued to grow. And it's a really active community to this day as well. The second example that we've got down here is from a charity in the UK called Prostate Cancer UK. You might have been able to tell by mine and Claire's accents, but we are not from the States. And again, this is another great group where it's runners supporting each other. And it doesn't just have to be for sports. It could be for anything. You know, it could be for people that have had life experience from the cause that you're working for, or could be teachers or, you know, mums with young kids that are wanting healthy recipes. It could be anything. So really thinking, okay, what group could we set up for our organization, or what groups could we begin to actually tap into to make sure that our message is reaching people in this really kind of private and connected way. Just time for another quick poll. We just wondered, are any of you sort of as individuals or like as your organizations, are you part of a social media group, or do you run a social media group? Would just love to kind of see what you guys are thinking. Okay, perfect. So No is coming out on top, but the second most popular one is actually you're part of a social media group. And there's 5 people who voted that actually run social media groups, which is really interesting. So a really nice kind of varied mix there. Definitely, if you haven't been in a social media group, and if you're on Facebook, would highly recommend just going and typing into that groups tab, and finding some different groups that you might actually want to have a look at, and just go in and just join and just learn from them and see, kind of see how social media runs a little bit differently when it comes to a group rather than a Facebook page, for example. Topic number 3. So this is all about working with influencers. Again, just to stipulate, we don't mean celebrities. As the number and the variety of influencers has grown over the past number of years, it's a really, really important tactic to have in your social media toolbox. And again, influencers can have million plus followers if it's the big celebrities, or it might be a activist that's based in a small town that has only maybe like 2,000 followers, but they're really dedicated. So really thinking about what sorts of different influencers could you work with. And as nonprofits as well, we really need to think about different ways that we can continuously reach new audiences, and influencers provide that great opportunity to do that, and they provide this kind of individual and peer-to-peer connection. I'm just going to hand over to Claire for the next slide to dive in about how we actually work with them.
Thanks, Faye. Yeah, so working with influencers can do so many things. First off, they can help amplify the reach of your key campaigns. So when you've got your objective, when you've got your key messaging, you know exactly what your campaign is going to do, they can really help get that reach when you work with them, because it's almost like a kind of secret underground network that people don't get to see on the outside, but it's all on the inside. You're connecting with them, you're building those relationships. They then believe in what you're saying, and then they're happy to share it on their channels to people they speak to every day, and you get way more reach. So as I said, they help share key messages, but they also help share your call to action more widely as well. So if there's a petition or a pledge that you want people to really get behind, you can work with those partners to share it on their channels. They might get picked up from somewhere else that works in the same organization, and someone sees it and says, I want to get involved. And it's just a really lovely way to make those connections way further than just your organization. They also help to validate your message. So if you see someone that you really admire, or are quite respected in your industry, and they're sharing a message, way more likely to agree with it and kind of take on what they're saying. So really helps establish your organization as the go-to experts on your issue. So why should you work with them? So they're a great way to reach your target audiences. And it's because of the power to peer. So people, we love a brand, but you're more likely to connect with people over a bit of a brand message or organization message. If you hear it from someone that you're connected to, people are going to make that call to action. They're going to take on board. They're going to be motivated. They're going to do what you want them to do. When thinking about influencers you could get in touch with, there's kind of a few questions you could ask yourself. So the main thing is you want to amplify your work. So who are your audiences following? Who are the key voices and the areas you work in? And as Faye said earlier, it's not just about celebrities, thinking about activists, policymakers, campaigners, even kind of local, you could say celebrities, or kind of people that if they're willing to get involved with your organization, they've already got a community that they can go out to that you can work with. So it sometimes comes down to numbers, but it mainly comes down to influence. An example of an organization that we've worked with, that CAPNIP have worked with, is the NGO Global Witness. They challenge abuses of power to protect human rights and the environment. We worked with them on a campaign last year that was quite specifically around influencing for COP26. So we worked with them, and we got over 160 influential voices and 100 organizations from 15 different countries to join the call to action. We work with climate activists, campaigners, and those who really, really were on the front line of the climate crisis. So activists, land and environmental defenders. And we worked with people that had followings from large to small. So we go from someone who was based in the Amazon with potentially a couple of hundred followers, they're projecting the message, up to, we did get a retweet from Greta Thunberg, which Faye and I were over the moon about. So it really is about, from the smallest to the largest, who can you go out to, who can you work with? You're working with these influencers to build key relationships, and we did that with Global Witness. And going forward, it's taken them into their next campaign for COP27. We've built those key relationships. We've got this community to go back to, and it's really, really raised their profile among climate activists. And it's resulted in really, really high social engagement. And it's just on a roll now. And we've got this very embedded, trusted organization relationship across other organizations as well. Back to Faye. You're trying to find mute there, Faye.
Thank you. I was struggling. My Zoom bar had hidden itself. Sorry about that. Thank you, Claire. The dangers of presenting and speaking at the same time. So this might all sound very well and good, but how do you actually find these influencers? So we just wanted to kind of share some of our top tips with you. So first and foremost, your partners and allies, like who are you already connected to in the space? Who are like-minded organizations? Who are part of working groups that you might be part of? Have a scan through their followers. Have a look at their Twitter lists. Twitter lists can actually be an amazing source to find different influencers in this kind of way. Twitter lists are really handy as well, to actually go and have a look at the Twitter list that your organization are part of. So there's a little function within Twitter itself where you can see what list you're actually part of, and you can find some great connections in there. Have a look through your past performing content as well. You know, did you do a really powerful campaign last year that got a lot of retweets, for example, or was highly shared on Instagram? Go and have a look. Who engaged with it? Is there anybody in there that's like hidden that might be like verified, or, you know, as Claire said, is influential in the area that you're working in? So just go and have a bit of a dig down into your past, your top past performing content. Google as well, like our solid old friend. Experiment with different search terms. Have a look through news articles. Who is writing reports and pieces about the cause that you're working on? Is there any organizations that you might not have heard of that are working in the relevant space? And definitely go and have a look and add them to your list as well. And this kind of sums up the final point here of like checking the news. You know, like I'm sure many people on this call will be keeping an eye on the news around your cause anyway. Is there any new reporters that are kind of on the beat that are covering this for the first time? And I know Matt, who's doing the media training, will talk a lot more about this. Is there any people that have been mentioned, like giving quotes or case studies? Go and have a look at them, you know, go and have a look, see if they've got Twitter, give them a follow. Is anybody talking to them? And just our secret weapon when it comes to influencer outreach, which is a free tool, which helps massively, is TweetDeck. TweetDeck is an amazing way to be able to keep a tab on your influencers. If you build a Twitter list, for example, you can keep an eyeball on who's saying what, dive it right in there and engage with them and kind of monitor what they're saying. So it's a really great tool to even just download, have a play about with. You don't even have to download it. There's a web version as well, which is completely free. You just need a Twitter account. So that's one of our top tips, is to definitely use TweetDeck when it comes to your influencer outreach and monitoring. In terms of actually how to engage with influencers, so we've just put together like our little ladder of engagement when it comes to influencer outreach. The first one is monitoring, which I've just sort of touched on. So Can you follow them? Can you comment on what they're saying? Can you quote tweet? Can you retweet? Can you share ahead of key moments? Be sure to be generous towards your influencers. You know, it's a two-way street. It's a two-way relationship. You might want them to retweet you. In the future, they might want you to retweet them. So it's really about responding and reciprocating when you make specific asks of people. So really use social media to actually prime your targets to amplify your messages. Start engaging with them a month or kind of a few weeks out from the campaign launch, so that you're actually building up those relationships over time, so that when it does come to a big campaign launch, for example, you've already got a cohort of trusted contacts that you can go out to. As Claire mentioned in the Global Witness example before, that Global Witness can now go out to those relationships that we built last year and ask them to amplify their messaging this time around. Just to continue with this, if you've got a high priority influencer, so that could be a reporter, it could be a policymaker, an activist, give them a bit of a heads up, give them a bit of a teaser, like, hey, we are launching this campaign and we would love for you to help us amplify it, or we would love for you to join us. Like, is there a call to action that they can take to help support your campaign? Don't be afraid to slide into their DMs once you've created a relationship with them, or even send them an email if you're on that level of communication, and ask them to share your key messages that you want them to amplify. A really big thing as well is for those people that don't amplify, if you have the time, send those non-responsive influencers on your list a reminder, and always be sure to thank the influencers that have shared your message, or respond to any questions that you get from your direct messages. You know, it's not just a case of sending a direct message on Twitter or Instagram, for example, and then not responding to people when they want more information, or might want the report from a stat that you've mentioned, or whatever else. So always be sure to actually follow up with your influencers and thank them, because again, it's all this idea about putting the social back into social media, even with influencer outreach. So thank you for bearing with us for the first half of this training. We're just going to put in a 5-minute break. So I don't know if the wonderful NFSN team might be able to pop a note into the chat just to tell folks when to be back by. I always struggle converting time zones in my head. Forgive me, because we're based in the UK. So yeah, we can all take a 5-minute break, grab a drink, have a comfort break, whatever you need. And then we'll be back in 5 minutes to conclude the second half of this training. Thank you very much, everyone. Great. Well, hope you all had a nice quick break, grabbed a quick drink, stood up, stretched your legs a little bit. So moving on to our next section. So we mentioned this at the beginning. We would absolutely love it if for the next kind of 10 to 15 minutes, we'd love to invite 2 to 3 participants, if you're happy to do so, and you could just pop these into the chat if you don't want to say it out loud, to actually share a recent social media challenge that you've been having, and we can actually workshop this live, hopefully using some of the tactics that we've talked about today. So in terms of what that challenge could be, it could be anything from staff capacity, it could be, have you had any content creation woes? Is there anything going on that's just a bit of a bugbear right now in the world of social media, limited budgets, for example? So yeah, would love to open it up to the floor, to see if there's either 2 to 3 volunteers that might either be willing to kind of say their woe out loud, or pop it into the chat, and hopefully the wonderful NFSN team can help keep an eye out in case we do have any volunteers. And if we don't, that's okay too.
Hi there. Is it okay if I ask my question aloud because it's kind of long to type?
Yeah, of course. Please do.
Okay, thank you. So I'm Nadia. I'm with the Oregon Farm to School and School Garden Network. And one of our social media challenges is that our network uses social media to amplify the posts of school garden educators and school food professionals in our state. And I'm our communications chair. And I've just noticed recently that it's been really difficult to find posts of our partners and promote them. And so I was wondering if anybody else has come across that or has tips.
Ah, interesting. So when you say find posts, do you just mean as in struggling to kind of locate them online, or do you mean sort of struggling where partners aren't kind of regularly posting? Would you mind just diving into that a little bit more, Nadia?
Yeah, definitely. Certainly both. I have noticed that there used to be this really nice feed where partners posts would show up and it'd be people who we interact with frequently would be at the top. And then recently it feels like it's been these random nonprofits who we are loosely associated with. And then there's also that second part of our partners don't always post that often. So there's not that always that much to amplify.
So what I would say, and I think this is kind of twofold. So in terms of being able to monitor your partners online, this is where stuff like TweetDeck can come in really, really handy, because you can build Twitter lists. So for example, you could add all of your partners, obviously follow them all and add them all into one specific list, so that then you just have one place to go online every single day when you're wanting to check. If you do decide to use something like TweetDeck, again, you can just build a specific column for that Twitter list, so that you're not having to endlessly scroll. I think this is might be one of the issues, is endlessly having to scroll through different types of content, whereas using something like Twitter lists and TweetDeck can be really, really handy in order to be able to kind of locate the posts that you're wanting to amplify. In terms of partners not posting much, that's a hard one, but there's definitely ways around that. So you could even really think about kind of doing the sort of tactics that we've talked about with influencer outreach, but for your partners. So for example, if you put out a campaign post that you'd love people to either engage on or comment on, you could sort of send them a DM and be like, hey, we've posted this, we'd love for you to kind of quote tweet it or share it to your Instagram story with your own take on this. So definitely don't be afraid to actually ask partners to engage with you. If there's kind of a big campaign coming up as well, so if you're doing anything around, say, Giving Tuesday, or a theme for a month month, like whatever it might be, actually pulling together almost like a little bit of a toolkit, so like a social media toolkit. And it doesn't have to be like really big. It could just be like it could be like a 1-page Word doc, for example, where there's some kind of suggested sort of content. So depending on the relationship that you actually have with your partners, you could definitely like begin to prompt them a little bit more when it comes to kind of producing content that you then want to amplify from your organization's own account. I think Claire kind of touched on this earlier, just the change that we're seeing on social media at the moment in terms of algorithms. It can be really, really hard to actually dig through that sort of different content. So definitely like utilizing Twitter lists, saving sort of any good Instagram posts that you see from partners on Instagram, saving it on Instagram, of course, and later amplifying that might be useful. I'm just going to open the chat. Thank you for the thumbs up, Nadia. Hope that was helpful. Erica, you have the same issue. You follow accounts through your organization's account and then go to that specific news feed, but now posts are not showing up near the top. Yes, again, unfortunately, this is a big thing that we're seeing across the board. Twitter in particular, Instagram more recently, have changed the way, that their algorithms are working. Rather than it being sort of in a timely kind of fashion as it used to be like a few years ago, it's now ranking content in a multitude of different ways. So really thinking about like, how can I keep tabs on my partners? And it could be something as simple as actually having like an Excel spreadsheet where you've got everybody's handles, like the old school kind of way of doing it. If you don't have like a tweet deck, or if you don't use Twitter, for example, there's definitely means and ways around that. But it is an annoying thing that we've seen recently that's come with algorithm changes. I think, Sean, did you have a challenge that you were happy to share? Just checking my chat.
Yeah, so I have like basically I'm a farm to school program. We're brand new, so I've just been kind of struggling to figure out how to launch it, or if you just had any kind of tips on like, I want it to be like slightly entertainment, but also kind of a useful tool for folks to know if there's like school events going on, or like I have this recipe for spaghetti squash where I want the community to send me recipes. So I guess I'm just trying to figure out if you had any tips, or my struggle has been kind of getting a brand identity and knowing when maybe, because I'm typical to try to do too many things where maybe it's like folks don't know exactly what the point is. So I guess just if there's any things to get me the ball rolling that would help me kind of hone down or decide how to go with my content.
So what I would say, and this is congratulations on launching for the first time. If you're kind of going into the world of social media, that's super exciting. Yes, fist pump indeed. A really good way to kind of help balance content is the 80-20 rule. So really think about that 80% of what you want to put out on social should be entertaining, should be the recipe that you just mentioned, might be like a funny meme that you've come across or whatever else. So 80% should be content that people want to kind of consume on social media and what they go to social media for. And that 20% can then really be about your organization, your cause and all that kind of thing. And you'll actually see sort of big brands, so like anybody from like, I don't know, Walgreens right through to like Best Buy or Disney, like they'll sometimes use this similar kind of rule as well, especially when they're wanting to sell stuff, like 80%, like 3 posts out of 4 are going to be entertaining, are going to be a video, a meme or whatever else. And then that final 4th post is really going to be about like, buy this now, here's your discount code, and we can actually use those same rules in nonprofits as well, and really kind of thinking, okay, 80% of what I put out is case studies, memes, entertaining recipes or whatever else, and then 20% could be your donate now, supporters, come volunteer, whatever it might be. So that's kind of one definitely kind of one rule to think about. I'm really keen to hand over to Claire, who's got a much more creative brain than me when it comes to kind of thinking about graphics and your brand identity as well. So Claire, any top tips from you for Sean when it comes to brand identity and launching social for the first time?
Yeah, I mean, launching social is so exciting, and depending obviously on what platforms you're on, you've got so many different kind of types of media to work with. And one of the things that can feel quite overwhelming is how many channels there are. So we've kind of adopted something that's the COPE approach, which is create once, publish everywhere, but we kind of also add on, but tailor it. So obviously, if it's for Instagram, you want to be talking to an Instagram audience. If it's Twitter, you want to be talking to a Twitter audience. But if you've got that fundamental bit of content for your recipe, make it work for Twitter, make it work for Instagram. So check out, you know, if it's going to work on Reels, post it like either like a carousel walkthrough, and then make sure you're posting in your stories, because we've seen more and more the audiences really interact with the different types of tools available on all the platforms. So again, going back to Instagram, for example, you'll have people that do still want to scroll through that feed. You've got people that are going to specifically look for videos and kind of look at the Reels function. And you've got some people that literally just look at stories. So if you're, you know, amplifying it in your stories, you're going to hopefully reach a different kind of audience. And then you're able to then redirect them through the links kind of function to get them back round to where you want them to go. Website, carousel, whatever you want them to pinpoint to. And then in terms of brand identity, I mean, obviously you've already said you want it to be really fun. I think we've kind of touched on it earlier, like conversational is the way to go. And you sound like a very conversational person. So like it's going to come hopefully quite natural for you, but kind of keep it short, keep it simple, and keep it warm and friendly. I think it's now people have the attention span of 7 seconds when they start to see something. So you've really got to get in there quickly. So the kind of pyramid of information, make sure that what you're saying, that's the most important bit of information, is right at the top of any copy, right at the front of any script, right at the start of any video. And yeah, you'll get people to kind of hold on a bit longer, see what you've got to say, and then hopefully be mobilized to get involved, take action, whatever you want them to do. In terms of finding your voice, there's obviously some questions you can ask yourself about kind of, what do you want to be seen as in the world? What do you want your social media to do? Are you going to just be kind of broadcasting information, or do you want people to, you know, build that community? As we spoke about earlier, communities are so important to get that reach. So we always recommend to have a two-way conversation. If someone's commenting on anything, make sure you reply. And yeah, kind of make sure you're asking a call to action. So even if it's just kind of like, did you try the recipe? What did you think? Yeah, just kind of always trying to pull that back round to them responding to you, and hopefully that engagement will increase. And then, yeah, in terms of a launch, I think just make sure you've got all your channels for a launch date. Say definitely do all the posts on the one day. But another tool that we've kind of implemented, as I said earlier, is really varying when your content goes out. So for example, you've got your recipe, don't put it out on every single channel on the same day, kind of weave it throughout the week. So if someone does follow all of your platforms, they won't see just that one thing and be like, oh, well, I know they're going to post about the same topic, so they might switch off. So you kind of want to vary up, whether you've got, you know, a recipe one day or an informational carousel another day, but just kind of like to really keep it a bit more varied. We've seen that definitely increase people's engagement on the platform, just because they're not like, I know exactly what Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter are going to say. Hopefully that was helpful.
Awesome. Thank you to whoever just unmuted me. I'm sorry, I keep losing my Zoom taskbar. Thank you, Claire, and thank you, Sean, for sharing, and good luck with your launch as well. Like we hope it goes well, and definitely do, if you've got the recipe to hand, I don't know if it's written down somewhere online, drop it into the chat. That sounds a great recipe. Would love to give it a try. Abby, you've got your hand up.
Hi, I've got one. We're also a newer nonprofit that has been forming Farm to School Frederick in Maryland. And we have various partnerships that we've formed, obviously, in the community. How do you go about to getting to the point where you don't feel like you're just constantly giving them free advertising without getting engagement or anything in return?
Really, really good question. Really, really good question. This is kind of like twofold for this one. So I think one really depends on sort of the relationship that you've got with them offline. So, you know, what is that kind of relationship between your organization and their organization? You know, is there kind of any sort of understanding of like, hey, we will support you on social media, but in return, we expect XYZ, you know, ABC, whatever it might be. So really kind of that, I think that's kind of one question, you know, is there organizationally, is there anything written into kind of like your partnership program where it is about kind of, you know, co-amplification of social media content? So that would be my first kind of point. Secondly, as Claire kind of mentioned to Sean's question, really thinking about what are those opportunities for engagement? You know, could it be a case of I don't know, you publish a poll on Twitter, for example, where you're asking a question, what do people think about topic X? Don't be afraid to actually tag them in the comments below. You know, you could tag in like a bunch of your partners. You could do the same on an Instagram comment or an Instagram story and be like, hey, partner, whatever, like, what do you think about this? Like, hey, come in and vote. And it's really about kind of making it fun and making them like almost want to kind of engage, but obviously, you know, behind the scenes and behind those lines, you can have that conversation with them. You know, don't ever be afraid to kind of be like, hey, you know, we've noticed that we'd love for you to engage more. You know, it's all about kind of really, I guess, selling it to them about like, why is it going to benefit them as well? It's like, this is engagement opportunities for us both. I've actually come across this personally, like in a previous job role where, again, I was working with partners and it was a little bit like pulling teeth and trying to get that sort of content back. And one thing that I did that worked really well was just have a conversation and have a bit of a brainstorm about, is there like a campaign that you could all work on together? Like, is there something coming up for like, obviously it's just been Farm to School month, like there's Giving Tuesday. Is there kind of a national day, or like, is there something you might want to do over Thanksgiving or Christmas or like New Year or whatever it might be that you could actually all kind of co-collaborate on? So at least then some of the onus is on some of those additional kind of partners that you've got to almost sort of step up to the plate and help with some of this social media content creation. So it's not just all like resting on your organization's social media shoulders, as that were, if that kind of helps a little bit.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. No problem. We've got about 25 minutes left, I think, for this presentation. And we definitely want to spend some time doing Q&As as well. But I just did want to put one more kind of ask out there. Is there anybody else who has a social media challenge that they'd like to kind of workshop with this group, or any kind of question that's cropped up from the three wonderful examples that we've had from Nadia, Sean and Abby? I just want to give one last opportunity for anyone to share a challenge if you have one. And if not, we can move on. I'll just give it a couple more seconds. No. Okay. Well, thank you very much to all those three wonderful folks for sharing. And we'll have Q&A at the end. So if anything does come up, we can definitely cover it in the Q&A as well. So we've talked a lot about 2022 and the social media trends that we've seen so far, but 2023 is literally like round the corner, 8 weeks away, which is slightly terrifying. Social media moves quickly. Trends come, trends go. If you do a bit of a Google search for like 2023 social media trends, there is already an absolute ton out there to kind of read and consume and really think about. So what we wanted to do was kind of pick some of the ones that we're already sort of seeing emerge, and really the ones that we wanted to flag to folks on this call for what we think are going to be the most important ones for nonprofits to keep an eye on as we move into the new year. The first one that we wanted to share was authenticity. This might sound like a bit of a weird one, but with the popularity of TikTok, user-generated content that we've talked about throughout this training, especially coming out of the pandemic, even more like apps such as Be Real, which is a social media platform which prompts you to take a picture in that moment. What are you doing, like impromptu right now? Audiences are demonstrating that they have a preference for this type of realistic, in the moment type of content, that true to life kind of documentation versus the really highly polished content that we might have seen a few years ago. So really kind of being authentic is going to be a big trend that we are expecting in 2023. And this, we're already seeing this kind of reflected in the types of content that people are sharing. So for example, Instagram is a wonderful example of this. People are moving away from the heavily edited photos, the heavily edited filters, and are actually going back to normal photos and doing photo dumps. Like photo dumps are such kind of a big trend at the moment, where people are literally picking 10 photos, which might be from a holiday or like an event that they've been to, or a music concert, and just dumping them on Instagram. And this is definitely a trend that nonprofits and organizations can take part in as well. Are you doing like an event, for an example, where people are gathering together, take 10 photos and do a photo dump the next day? Be like, oh, this was our meeting, our mobilization meeting, our gathering, whatever, and actually dump it on Instagram. This also really ties into live social media as well. So we touched on live a little bit earlier as a 2022 trend, but this is going to continue into 2023. So again, it's really about, like, you can't get more in the moment than like a live video stream on social media, whether that's Instagram or YouTube or Facebook or Twitter or TikTok. The possibilities are endless when it comes to being authentic and providing in the moment content. TikTok 2.0, this is definitely one to keep on your radars. This is an app that is continuing to evolve and will continue to even further evolve in 2023. It started off as like a dance app before the pandemic. It then became like a voiceover app where people were sharing like days in their lives and, like, come shopping with me, make my house clean with me, or whatever it might be. But it's growing more and more and more every single day. I think TikTok now has about 30 million users worldwide, and it's just continuing to grow. And it will, I think, probably in 2023 overtake Facebook in terms of like that daily growth number. So it's definitely one to keep an eyeball on. It's like an unstoppable app. It's where Gen Z are heading. It's where they are going to in droves. They're not joining Facebook. They're not joining Twitter. They're heading to TikTok. So if you have like a younger audience that you want to connect with, really experiment with TikTok. And as Claire mentioned in the snackable content section of this, have a bit of a play around, join TikTok yourself as a user to just kind of get a feel for what the app is like. Interactivity. This might sound like a bit of a weird one, but this is all about engagement. Engagement is kind of one thing, but when it comes to algorithms and when it's coming to thinking about how content is ranking on platforms, it is about interaction. So again, we've said it quite a few times, but it's really about putting the social back into social media, providing ways for people to talk to you. Like, is it running a poll? Is it utilizing some of the great tools that like social media platforms already have to drive interaction? Instagram is a great example of this. They do quizzes, they do polls, they do like Q&A. So really thinking, how can you actually create that two-way dialogue between your organization or your social accounts and your audience, and the rewards will follow. You know, if you're utilizing the tools that social media platforms want you to utilize, you will be rewarded with like algorithm boosts and all this kind of stuff. The human touch, this kind of leans into a little bit again about interactivity and being authentic. Again, people want to connect with people. They don't want to connect with brands or like faceless organizations. It's all about the people. That example that Claire shared earlier of the ACLU TikTok video worked so well because it was somebody there right in the moment. So really have a think, you know, is there a way that you can like drive this first for authenticity? You know, do you have like a case study of a person that's been impacted by your cause or is a beneficiary? Could you record them? Like, could you do like a live conversation with them on Instagram? You know, really thinking about injecting that like first person storytelling into your content and really thinking about like how can we use the casual environment that social media offers to our advantage. So again, thinking about that conversational tone, talking like a human on social, not making it rigid, not being a robot, and really thinking how can we drive the fact that this is an organization that is run by humans, thankfully, but you know, is run by people that really care about what we're doing. Accessibility is a big one. This is a big shift that we have seen. Even the platforms make Twitter now instills, you know, everyone has the ability to add alt text. People get prompted in order to do this. And obviously with organizations that have big missions or little missions or however you want to rank your cause, it's really important that we are making sure that content is accessible for everyone. You know, our society is marked by inequalities. Like one thing that we can do is try and make our social media content equal, you know, and as well attentioned as we might be when it comes to social media content, it can be really disempowering for somebody that does have a disability that they can't interact with that social media content in the same way. So really thinking about like your alt text, subtitles on videos, Instagram, you know, using captions, like describing things a little bit more, making sure that like, you know, if there's subtitles that it matches the pace that people can read to, all this kind of stuff. So there's definitely like a whole host of different things that you can try. And you can even start off small. Like one of our favorite kind of tips that we love to mention to people is when you're typing out a hashtag, make sure that you do it in something called camel case, which is a very fancy way of basically saying capitalize every single new word that is in a hashtag, just because then a screen reader will actually be able to identify those different words rather than just like a long string of garble to a screen reader. So just really making sure that you capitalize each word in your hashtag. Niche platforms as well. I kind of mentioned this a little bit. People are leaving Facebook in droves. Ever since, you know, like Facebook's role in the Capitol riots back in January last year, like the way that Facebook unfortunately has an impact on people's lives in terms of like Instagram and how the algorithm can impact people. Like it's people are leaving the platform. Like they don't trust the platform anymore, and this has seen such a rise to kind of niche platforms kind of coming up. So we've mentioned Be Real, that's kind of the big one that's sort of come out this year. Niche platforms are going to continue to be launched in 2023. Not all of them are going to stick around, as they're trying to upset the apple cart and kind of crack through the influence that like the big three have. But TikTok was a niche platform when it first kind of came out, and look at what a disruptor that's going to be. So it's just worth keeping an eye on, like, where are your audience going? You know, a big kind of trend that we saw especially in 2020, was people using Twitch. So like Twitch historically had been what gamers use to kind of live stream their games or like gather together, you know, if they're doing like a live game, if they're gaming together at the same time or whatever it might be. Whereas Twitch now is used for a ton of different reasons. You know, people do live cooking on Twitch. They host concerts on Twitch, like non-profits have begun to kind of dabble into the waters of Twitch a little bit, but like it's really thinking, okay, where are my audience going to go? And not only your current audience, but the audience that you want to be hitting next. So it is that kind of younger generation. It is that Gen Z, you know, where are they actually going and where are they spending their time online? So just a couple of trends to just keep an eye on. We're now in the Q&A that's just been mentioned, and I've just seen a question here from Shirley that I'm going to read out, which was the name of the font that I just mentioned. So this isn't a font, it's a tactic when it comes to hashtags. So it's called camel case, as in the hump camel. I'm not sure why it's called camel case, but it is. But it's just the tactic of literally capitalizing each new word in a hashtag, and I guess they call it camel because it might look like a hump every time you capitalize that new word. So it just about allowing screen readers to be able to read those. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Karen. That's a great example. Hashtag camel case rather than camel case. So would love to pass it over to the floor because I think you've heard enough of me talking now. Just wondered if there was like any additional questions from folks, or anything that we can, or any other challenges that you might be that folks might be facing. So yeah, would love to just hand it over to the floor and see if there's any questions. And as June mentioned earlier, feel free to just chuck them in the chat, or if you want to put your hand up and speak it out loud, that's totally okay too. So whatever folks feel comfortable with. Ooh, good question from Abby. Any noteworthy trends or tactics on social media to increase fundraising? Yes, definitely a couple. So the two that instantly spring to mind, number one is working with influencers. So it's actually working with influential voices and actually getting them to help fundraise for you. So whether that might be they go live on a TikTok video, or they do an Instagram reel for you. Like the platforms now, especially Instagram, have actually made it so that you can have like a fundraising link in your bio. So you can actually, in the same way that you might set up like a fundraising page on Facebook, you can now do the same in Instagram. So if there is any kind of noteworthy people that you have in your organization's network, really thinking about, okay, how can we tap into those, and how can we use them and their influence to help raise money for us. The other big thing as well that I would definitely mention, and this only came out recently in the UK, so we'd have to double check in the US, but I think it will be rolled out there already, is Facebook have recently introduced a ton of new tools for nonprofits when it comes to fundraising. So this idea that we mentioned earlier about kind of mass participation fundraising. So Facebook challenges, they've been a really, really kind of big thing, especially over here in the UK, where we couldn't do sort of like we couldn't do offline events like runs or cookathons or whatever it might be. So people were doing them online instead. So really kind of like having a look at like Facebook's nonprofit center, and we'll definitely dig out the link and chuck that into, we'll send that to the wonderful folks at NFSN, and that can be sent around as well. But they have like a ton of different tools that you can use in order to help with fundraising. But those are the two that initially jump to mind. Question from David: for organizations that only have one comms person or limited time to work on social media, do you have a recommendation on a daily, weekly workflow or what to prioritize? This is a tricky one, and both Claire and I have been in the shoes of being in sort of really small kind of social media teams. I've been a social media manager where I've had to sort of manage it all by myself, and it's tricky. It can be very tricky and it can be very overwhelming. The biggest piece of advice that we can give is planning. So really thinking about your content schedule. Even if you only have the time to kind of plan week to week, like we'd always try and recommend doing like month to month, just so that you do have a bigger picture of kind of what's coming up, but really thinking about like, what is the content that I need to get out? If you've got multiple sort of social media accounts, you know, a great tactic that Claire mentioned earlier is the COPE approach. So create once, post everywhere, but making sure that it is tailored to each platform that you are posting on. Definitely having a think about how the actual platforms themselves can help you. So like TweetDeck, for example, you could schedule all of your tweets for a week. You can actually do this natively on Twitter now as well. It allows you to schedule. So really just kind of thinking, really thinking ahead and trying to carve out, even if it's just, you know, an hour or two on like a Monday morning or a Friday afternoon, what content can you plan? What content can you schedule? And then really kind of making sure that that's done, and then spending, even if it's just 10 or 15 minutes a day, engaging with your social media audience. You know, is it a case of you do a quick scan before you head out on your lunch? Has anyone tweeted at you? Should you be responding to anyone? Do you have any DMs? Is there any influencers that you want to kind of amplify or retweet or share? And again, really thinking about like, even the free tools that are out there, like I know I've mentioned, I don't work for TweetDeck. It sounds like I do with the amount of times I've mentioned them, but like TweetDeck is such a wonderful resource because it does allow for like this quicker kind of workflow. So I hope that answers your question, David. Any other questions from folks in the chat?
We still have one question from earlier from Shirley.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Okay. So that was, how do we think the takeover from Elon Musk is going to impact social media strategy going forward for Twitter?
Claire, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I do actually. I have been keenly keeping an eye on it, and there's no way that it can't change it, but obviously it won't be immediately. There's a few things that people have been talking about. On a good note, it might help eliminate the bots, so the audience number is a much truer reflection of who's actually engaging with your content. You get a better readout of kind of persona, what are they called? Kind of, yeah, personas of who's looking at your stuff, and hopefully a lot less bad behavior. However, there's been obviously question about what free speech means to Elon Musk. So whether he is actually going to let people that have previously been blocked from the platform, whether they're going to come back. And the other thing that's quite interesting from my perspective is the subscription. So I'm sure everyone's heard that he's suggesting $20 per month for a blue tick. No one knows whether that means that anyone can acquire a blue tick or whether you still have to reach a certain level of followers. But it just means that you're, maybe more exposed to people that look like they're a verified profile that actually aren't, and are then using that to kind of peddle misinformation. But in terms of now for how you use Twitter, I think it's got to be business as usual until we start to see implementation of what Elon Musk is actually going to do. He's obviously dissolved the board of directors, so we'll see who comes in. But I think it's very much a kind of watch this space at the moment. But users aren't going to change their behaviors off the back of it at the moment. You might get, you know, some people leaving, which I've seen a few kind of prominent Twitterati leave. But at the moment, for your strategy, keep posting, keep making sure you're amplifying. And then I guess, yeah, people will start giving more information about how you can use whatever Twitter 3.1 is going to look like in the future. But yeah, TBC on that one, I'm really, really interested.
very big TBC, and it's kind of scary as well. Brianna, you've got your hand up. Thank you for putting your hand up. What's your question?
Yes, I tried to type it and I couldn't get it the way that I wanted it. So we run a state farm to school network. And this question is more focused on that authenticity part. We are very branded and an informational network, but we would love to start highlighting or spotlighting the work that's happening in the farm to school world, boots on the ground type people, projects, those kind of things. Do you have any tactics or post ideas to get people engaged with doing that, with sharing that with us so that we can get the word out of the things that they're doing, just to kind of maybe make it more of a reality for others that across the state who maybe haven't started that project?
That's a really great question. And yeah, sounds tough if you're like a heavily branded organization, but wanting to sort of amplify user-generated content. One thing that you could definitely use and having a think about is there any key dates kind of coming up in your calendar, like any national days where you could actually create content ahead of time and ask people to submit like their story or their lived experience of something that's happening that you might then want to repost further down the line. So just as an example, this is something that I've done previously in a previous role to Catnip, but like we were celebrating Pride Month and we were working with a healthcare nonprofit. And we put out a post on our Instagram where it was asking for LGBTQ health workers to share their story. What was kind of one lesson they wanted to sort of amplify, and we just set up a really simple Google Docs form that people could fill in anonymously if they wanted to sort of assign their name to it, they could. So really thinking about like, what content could you create, for example, that allows people to kind of submit their story, and thinking about if you are working in the confines of a brand and a heavily branded kind of organization, how then you actually present that kind of story as well. So this is where stuff like quote templates could come in. So like, you know, you're still working in the realms of your brand, but you're able to sort of amplify like people's stories. Other things to kind of keep an eye on, sort of as we've kind of mentioned as well, is amplification. You know, like this is where the power of retweets can come in. You know, is there any boots on the ground people that you work with that have their own Twitter account or have like in their own Instagram account that you could begin to sort of share on your own organization stories or in your own Twitter account as well? So it's just kind of setting that precedent of like, we are happy to amplify the stories of those folks that have kind of boots on the ground, so that you're almost kind of setting that precedent of like, we are happy to sort of share the stories of the people that are doing the work. But definitely like experiment, you know, if possible, if you have access to people that have like, you know, if you are able to talk to people that are actually on the ground, on the front lines doing this work, like ask them how they want to be amplified. You know, would they be happy to do like an Instagram live or like record a couple of videos themselves that they can then send into you and share. So it might be worthwhile just having a chat with some folks as well, just to see if they've got any kind of tips, because who better to help inform us than the people whose story that we're wanting to tell. So I hope that answers your question, Brianna. I know we've got like a minute left, so really gonna very quickly answer Hayes' question in the chat, which was, do we have any suggestions of resources for someone who doesn't know how to use all the social media tools like Reels, TikTok, IG stories, etc.? Honestly, this is where Google will become your best friend. Claire has also just chucked in a ton of helpful different links for each of the platforms. Going to the platforms themselves is kind of the big thing that we do. It's where we learn about our kind of upcoming trends. Claire, was there anything you wanted to mention on any of these links? Sorry, I think I keep cutting you off every time.
You're on a roll.
Sorry.
No, just to say, I'm a really big fan of the Hootsuite blog. Although you might not even use Hootsuite to schedule, they are quite generous with the kind of things they talk about, so you don't need to use their platform. Sometimes it can be a bit sally, but most of the time it's just there to support you as a social media user. So I'd say search the Hootsuite blog, because they've got just a ton of information from strategy, how-tos, top tips, algorithms, that kind of thing. And then as Faye just said, the native stuff, they're always going to be the most helpful, even if it comes from the platform themselves. Like, that's what they're for. They want people to use it. They're going to make sure that you can.
Awesome, thank you very much. Just before we close out, we just wanted to plug the other training that's happening as part of this series as well. So this is from one of our wonderful colleagues called Matt, who is doing a press and media training, which will be on November the 15th. So same time as this one. So 10 a.m. PT, 1 p.m. ET. June, I think, is going to put the registration link into the chat. But just to say a huge thank you to everybody that kind of turned up to join this meeting. We love being able to sort of talk about what gets us out of bed in the morning. So thank you for bearing with us. We know 90 minutes is quite a long time, so thank you so much to everybody who made the time to attend today. Folks that kind of shared their questions and their challenges, and I think the NFSN team will be circulating this training deck and the recording as well. But if you ever have any questions, you can find us at www.catnipcomms.com, but we'll make sure to put our contact details in that deck as well. So thank you very much. And I know we're 2 minutes over, so I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of the days, and we will see you all very soon, or hopefully again in the future.